The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 847 different species. Some breathed oxygen, others methane, and some existed as energy patterns in containment fields. But today, all of them were focused on the same thing. The humans were about to receive their judgment. Doyeon Kim stood in the center of the chamber, wearing the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. He was 42 years old, with tired eyes that had seen too many negotiations end in disappointment. Around him, the alien delegates sat in their specialized environments, some floating in liquid tanks, others perched on heating rocks, and a few existing only as holographic projections from distant worlds. The Supreme Arbiter, a creature named Thalmara, rose from her elevated platform. She looked like a mantis from Earth, but the size of a truck. Her multiple eyes gleamed as she began to speak in the universal language that translated automatically into every listener's mind. The Galactic Council has reached its decision regarding the human question, Thalmara announced. Her voice carried no emotion, just cold efficiency. After 300 years of provisional membership, humanity has failed to meet the standards required for full council citizenship. Doyeon didn't react. He had expected this. They all had. Thalmara continued reading from a data tablet held in one of her many limbs. The charges are as follows. First, excessive territorial expansion. Human explorers have repeatedly ventured beyond approved space boundaries, claiming new worlds without proper authorization. Second, dangerous scientific practices. Human researchers have questioned established scientific consensus and pursued forbidden lines of inquiry. Third, economic disruption. Human merchants have undercut established pricing structures, creating market instability. Fourth, military insubordination. Human defense forces have taken independent action without council approval. In the gallery above, Captain Hyejin Park gripped the railing. She was a military officer, tall and strong, with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek from a border skirmish. Next to her, Dr. Minho Lee was frantically taking notes on his datapad, his glasses reflecting the chamber's lights as he calculated what this would mean for humanity's future. The council has voted, Thalmara said. 835 species voted for restrictions. Only 12 voted against. Humanity will be reduced to tributary status. Your voting rights are revoked. Your territorial expansion is frozen. Your military forces will be limited to defensive operations only and subject to council oversight. Your scientific research will require pre-approval. Your trade will be regulated to ensure market stability. Thalmara looked directly at Doyeon. Do you accept the council's judgment? The chamber fell silent. Every being present waited for the human response. They expected negotiation. They expected appeals for mercy. They expected humanity to plead for better terms. Doyeon took a slow breath. He thought about the 300 years humanity had spent trying to fit into this system. 300 years of compromises. 300 years of bending their nature to please beings who would never see them as equals. 300 years of hoping that patience and cooperation would eventually earn them respect. He had his answer ready. It was shorter than anyone expected. Then we are done here, Doyeon said quietly. For a moment no one understood. Thalmara tilted her head in confusion. You refuse the judgment? That is not permitted. The council has spoken. No, Doyeon said louder now. I accept that the council has spoken. And I am telling you that humanity is done listening. He turned his back on the Supreme Arbiter. In council protocol, this was an enormous insult. Gasps and shocked chirps echoed through the chamber. But Doyeon didn't care anymore. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him, every human in the chamber stood up. Hyejin and Minho in the gallery. The other human diplomats in their sections. The human technicians who maintained the translation systems. The human security officers stationed at the doors. One by one, they all turned and followed Doyeon out. It was the most coordinated action humanity had ever taken in the council chambers. And it was their last. Counselor Vresh, a being who existed as a cloud of gas in a containment suit, made a gurgling sound that translated as laughter. Let them throw their tantrum. They will return when they realize they need us. Humans are too dependent on council infrastructure, council trade, council protection. Give them a month. They will come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But in the back of the chamber, some of the older species weren't so sure. They had studied human history. They knew what humans were capable of when pushed too far. One elderly delegate, a reptilian being named Krax, shook his head slowly. "I think we just made a terrible mistake," he whispered to his aide, outside the chamber. Doyen walked through the crystalline corridors of Council Station Alpha, behind him. The other humans maintained their pace. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. When they reached the docking bay, where the human shuttles waited, Doyen finally stopped. He turned to face the group. Diplomats, scientists, military officers, engineers, doctors, teachers, representatives of humanity from every colony and station in Council space. "Send the message," he said to his communications officer. The woman nodded and activated her secure transmitter. The message was brief, just 3 words, but it had been prepared for decades. Every human in Council space had been briefed on what it meant. Every human colony, station, and ship knew what to do when they received it. The message was, execute Protocol Exodus, within minutes. The signal reached every human presence in the galaxy. On trade stations, human merchants began closing their shops. On colony worlds, human settlers started packing. On defense platforms, human soldiers prepared to withdraw. On research vessels, human scientists backed up their data. It wasn't panic. It was precision. Humanity had planned this moment for 60 years, ever since it became clear that the Council would never accept them as equals. They had prepared for the day when staying became more costly than leaving. Trade Minister Una Choi was already aboard the first shuttle, sending instructions to every human merchant vessel. Close all Council contracts. Redirect all cargo to human space. Withdraw all credit from Council banks. Liquidate all assets that cannot be transported. We leave nothing behind. Admiral Ji-Hoon Song was aboard the command ship in orbit, issuing orders to the human defense fleet. All ships begin withdrawal from Council territory. Maintain defensive posture, but do not engage unless fired upon. We're going home. Dr. So-min Han was in the largest Council hospital, where she had worked for 12 years. She looked at her alien colleagues with genuine sadness. "I'm sorry," she told them. "But we tried. We really tried." Back at the docking bay, Doyen boarded the last shuttle. Through the viewport, he could see Council Station Alpha, that massive structure that represented everything the Galactic Council stood for: power, authority, order, and underneath it all, the assumption that might and age gave you the right to rule over others. "Sir," his pilot said, "we're ready to depart." Doyen nodded. "Take us home." As the shuttle pulled away from the station, Doyen allowed himself one last look back. 300 years of human history in Council space was ending. But as he watched the station shrink in the distance, he didn't feel sadness. He felt relief that they were finally free. The first sign that something was wrong came exactly 72 hours after the humans left the Council chambers. Merchant Prince Dolgrav arrived at his textile shop on Crossroads Station to find the doors sealed. Not locked, sealed, with a permanent barrier that his access codes couldn't open. Crossroads Station was the largest commercial hub in the sector, a massive ring-shaped structure where 400 species came to trade. Humans had built 30% of it, owned another 40% of the businesses, and maintained almost all of its critical systems. Dolgrav had rented his shop space from a human company for 20 years. He tried his communicator. No answer. He went to the station's administration office. The human receptionist, who usually sat there, was gone. In her place was a note written in clear universal language. All human personnel have departed. For property inquiries, contact Earth Legal Services. For maintenance issues, refer to technical documentation in station archives. Dolgrav rushed back to his shop. His environmental controls were already failing. The temperature was dropping. He sold textiles that required precise climate control, and his entire inventory was at risk. He pulled up the maintenance interface, but the instructions were all in human technical language. He couldn't understand half of it. All over Crossroads Station, similar scenes were playing out. The food court where 5 species came to eat was closing. Every restaurant there had been human-owned. The medical clinic where aliens came for treatment was empty. All 15 human doctors had left. The shuttle repair bay was abandoned. The human mechanics were gone, and they had taken their proprietary tools with them. Station commander Guan Nam was the last human administrator on Crossroads. She had stayed behind specifically to oversee the transition. She stood in the central control room, watching the chaos unfold on the security monitors. Alien merchants pounded on sealed doors. Maintenance crews stared at equipment they didn't know how to fix. Station security tried to access systems that no longer responded to their commands. Her communicator buzzed constantly. She ignored most of the calls. There was nothing she could do. The humans were leaving, and that was final. One call she did answer. It was Dolgraf. "Where are your maintenance crews?" he demanded. "My environmental system is failing. My merchandise will be ruined." Jiwan pulled up his file and sent him a data package. "These are the complete schematics for your shop's environmental system. You maintained climate control systems for 12,000 years before humans arrived at this station. I'm sure you'll figure it out." She cut the connection before he could respond. The truth was simpler than the aliens wanted to admit. They had stopped learning how to do things themselves. Why bother training your own engineers when you could hire human ones for cheaper? Why maintain your own equipment when human technicians did it better? Why solve problems when humans were always there to solve them for you? For 300 years, the galaxy had quietly grown dependent on human labor, human expertise, and human efficiency. Now that dependency was coming due. On the medical station Sanctuary 7, Dr. Somin Han spent her last day trying to train replacements. The hospital's director, a being named Kultros, who looked like a floating jellyfish, had assigned 5 alien doctors to learn from her. They had 1 day. Somin normally trained new doctors for 6 months. "This is the cardiac resonance scanner," Somin explained, showing them the human-made device. "It can detect heart problems in 47 different species. You input the species code here, calibrate for body mass here, and run the scan. The results appear on this screen." One of the alien doctors, a young Metherian with tentacles for hands, asked, "What if the species isn't in the database?" "Then you have to manually calculate the resonance frequency using these formulas." Somin pulled up a screen full of equations. The Metherian's skin turned a pale blue, which Somin had learned meant fear. "How long did it take you to learn this?" 2 years, Somin said honestly. "But I'm giving you the shortened version. You should be able to figure it out in 6 months if you study hard." "We don't have 6 months, Kultros said, floating closer. "We have patients arriving tomorrow who need this equipment. You can't just abandon them." Somin felt a flash of anger. "We didn't abandon anyone. The council abandoned us. They voted to make us subordinate, to restrict our freedoms, to treat us as lesser beings. Did you vote against that decision, Director?" Kultros' tentacles drooped. He had voted in favor. Most of the council had. "The medical database is on this server," Somin continued. "Every treatment protocol, every surgical technique, every diagnostic procedure humans have developed is in there. It's all yours. We're not taking it with us. But we're also not staying to hold your hand while you learn to use it. Your doctors? Figure it out." She left the hospital that afternoon. Behind her, alien medical staff frantically tried to learn in hours what had taken humans years to master. In the military sector, the withdrawal was even more dramatic. Admiral Ji-Hoon Song commanded the Human Defense Fleet, which had spent 300 years protecting Council space. Not because the Council paid them well. Humans had volunteered for defense duty because they believed in protecting others. But the Council had always resented that. They called humans militaristic and aggressive. Whenever human soldiers asked for better equipment or more support. Now, those soldiers were leaving. The Outer Rim colonies had relied entirely on human protection. They were far from Council core worlds on the border with hostile territories. The Council species there had refused to fund their own defense forces. Why bother when humans would do it for free? Governor Prax of Outer Rim Colony 12 watched in horror as the human ships powered up their engines. "You can't leave." He transmitted to Admiral Song. "The raiders will return. We'll be defenseless." Song's face appeared on the view screen. He looked tired but determined. "Governor, I have been requesting that Council colonies establish their own defense forces for 30 years. Every year, the Council Military Committee rejected my proposals. They said local defense forces were unnecessary. They said human ships were sufficient. Well, now human ships are departing. You should contact the Council Military Committee and ask them to send protection. The nearest Council fleet is 6 weeks away. Then I suggest you fortify your positions and prepare for a difficult month and a half. Good luck, Governor." The transmission ended. Governor Prax immediately sent an emergency message to the Council. So did 40 other colony governors, and 12 station commanders, and 53 frontier outposts. All of them had the same message: the humans were leaving, and they were going to die without protection. The Council's emergency session was chaos. Species that had voted to restrict humanity were now demanding that humans be forced to stay. They called it breach of contract. They called it abandonment. They called it betrayal, but Councillor Krax, the old reptilian who had warned them, finally spoke up. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. He had been on the Council for 300 years, longer than humanity had been members. "We didn't force them to stay when they wanted to be equals," Krax said. "We can't force them to stay now that we've made them subordinate. They're leaving because we gave them no choice. Every one of you voted to restrict them, to control them, to diminish them. Did you think there would be no consequences?" Thalmara, the Supreme Arbiter, clicked her mandibles in frustration. "They're being childish, emotional. This is why they weren't ready for full membership." "No," Krax said. "They're being practical. We told them they weren't wanted as equals. So they're going somewhere they are wanted. This isn't emotion. This is logic." Meanwhile, Colony Director Taeyong Kong was overseeing the evacuation of New Seoul, the human showcase colony in Council space. It had been beautiful once, a testament to human terraforming skill. They had turned a barren rock into a garden world. The Council had used it in their promotional materials, showing what membership could achieve. Now, the humans were taking it all back. Not the planet itself, of course, but everything they had built on it. The terraforming equipment was being packed. The agricultural data was being encrypted and deleted from local servers. The architectural plans were being wiped. Even the gardens were being carefully harvested. The rare earth plants being loaded onto ships. An alien journalist who had come to document the exodus asked Taeyong why they were being so thorough. Why not leave some of this behind? As a gift to the Council? Taeyong looked at the journalist with cold eyes. The Council voted to make us tributaries. That means they see us as subjects, not partners. You don't give gifts to people who want to chain you. Every bit of knowledge we leave behind is something they can use without compensating us. We're not being vindictive. We're being fair. The journalist published that quote. It spread across the galaxy within hours. Some species called humans petty. Others called them justified. But everyone was starting to realize the same thing. The humans weren't bluffing. They were really leaving. All of them. And they were taking everything they had built with them. 6 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council finally understood what they had lost. The numbers were undeniable, displayed on massive screens in the emergency session chamber. Trade volume down 43%. Medical capacity reduced by 60%. Defense incidents up 214%. Infrastructure failures reported daily. Economic Overseer Myra Yoon stood in the center of the chamber. She was one of only a dozen humans who had stayed behind in Council space and only to deliver this final report. She was old now, nearly 70, with gray hair and sharp eyes that had watched the Council make mistake after mistake. Today, she would explain exactly what those mistakes had cost them. The economic collapse is not simply about losing human traders, Myra began. Her voice was steady, professional. She could have been discussing the weather. Humans were never the largest trading faction in the galaxy. We were only about 15% of total trade volume, but we were the connective tissue holding the rest together. She pulled up a chart showing trade routes. Before the Exodus, they formed a complex web connecting hundreds of worlds. After the Exodus, the web had massive gaps. You see, humans traded with everyone. Species that hated each other would both trade with us. We were neutral ground. We hauled cargo between civilizations that refused direct contact. We brokered deals between factions that didn't trust each other. We provided the banking systems that enabled credit across cultural boundaries. When we left, all of that stopped. A council member named Praxis, who looked like a living crystal formation, spoke up. But we had trade for millions of years before humans arrived. We can do it again. Yes, Myra agreed. At a fraction of the efficiency. Let me give you an example. The Draxian Collective and the Mytharian Alliance have hated each other for 10,000 years. They would never trade directly, but both of them traded with humans. We bought Draxian crystals and sold them to Mytharians. We bought Mytharian gas and sold it to Draxians. Neither side knew they were indirectly trading with their enemy. Now that system is gone. The Draxians can't sell their crystals. The Mytharians can't get the gas they need. Both economies are suffering. She showed example after example. Humans had been the invisible infrastructure of galactic commerce. Not because they were the biggest or the richest, but because they were willing to deal with everyone equally. They didn't care about ancient feuds or political grudges. They just wanted to do business. The council had taken that for granted. Now they were paying the price. The military situation was somehow worse. Defense Minister Wanshik Park delivered his report via secure transmission from human space. He appeared as a hologram. Wearing the black uniform of the Terran Federation Defense Force, he looked different than he had 6 months ago. More confident. Less apologetic. 17 border regions are now experiencing raids, Wanshik reported. Not because the raiders suddenly became stronger, but because there's no one defending those regions anymore. 43 colonies have been evacuated due to inadequate defense. The Korathi swarm has expanded into 3 sectors previously held by human forces. They met no resistance. Admiral Grexith, the Council's military commander, objected. We have our own fleets. We don't need human protection. Wanshik smiled slightly. It wasn't a friendly expression. With respect, Admiral, when was the last time your fleet engaged in actual combat? Grexith's multiple eyes blinked. We maintain peacekeeping operations. We patrol trade routes. You haven't fought a real battle in 400 years, Wanshik said bluntly. Your ships are designed to look impressive at diplomatic events. Your crews are trained in parade formations, not combat tactics. Your maintenance schedules prioritize appearance over function. You have a parade fleet, not a military force. He pulled up tactical data from recent raids. The humans who defended your borders were in combat constantly. Border skirmishes, pirate raids, swarm incursions. We fought an average of 400 military actions per year. We knew how to maintain combat-ready forces because we had to. You paid us minimal support and complained about our militaristic culture while we did your fighting for you. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to admit it, but Wanshik was right. The Council had outsourced its defense to humans and then criticized them for being good at it. But the worst revelation came from the medical sector. Chief Counselor Vrox, who had always voted against human interests, was now dying from a plague on Taraxi Prime. His image appeared on the screen, and everyone could see how sick he was. His skin was gray, his breathing labored. The plague, he said quietly. Your doctors could cure this? Dr. Somenhan's face appeared on an adjacent screen. She was back on Earth now, working in a hospital in Seoul. She looked at Vrox with something that might have been pity. Yes, we could cure it, she said. We developed a treatment protocol 6 years ago when we first identified this plague strain. We offered to share it with the Council Medical Board. Do you remember what they said? Vrox closed his eyes. He remembered. They called it unnecessarily complex, Soman continued. They said our approach was typically human over complexity. They approved a simpler treatment instead, one that followed traditional council medical theory. We warned them it wouldn't work on the new strain. We showed them the data. They didn't listen. She pulled up the medical records. The treatment you approved works fine on the old plague strain. But this is a mutation. It requires a different approach. The approach we tried to give you 6 years ago. The approach you rejected because you thought you knew better. Can you help us now? Vrox asked. He was begging. The proud counselor was begging a human doctor for help. No, Soman said. Not because I don't want to, but because the council restricted human medical personnel from operating in council space. That was part of the judgment you voted for. If I returned to treat you, I would be violating council law. You made it illegal for me to help you. The transmission ended. Vrox died 3 days later. He wasn't the last. The plague spread to 4 more worlds. Tens of thousands died. The treatment that could have saved them was sitting in human databases, but pride and bureaucracy kept it from being used. The infrastructure failures were everywhere. Chief Engineer Bora had left behind one final document before departing. It was titled Critical Infrastructure Assessment, and it was devastating. She had cataloged every piece of human-maintained equipment in council space. The results showed that 70% of critical infrastructure had human components or design elements, power stations, water treatment facilities, communication networks, transportation grids, life support systems, all of them built or improved by humans over 3 centuries, and all of them slowly failing because no one else knew how to maintain them properly. The worst part was the security locks. Humans had built in administrator access to every system they designed. Standard practice. But they had never shared those codes with the council. Why would they? The systems were human-built and human-maintained. The council had never asked for the access codes because they never thought humans would leave. Now those codes were locked behind encrypted databases that the council couldn't crack. Not without decades of work. Systems were failing and no one could access the repair protocols. Thalmara raged about sabotage. She called it a war crime. She demanded humanity be sanctioned for leaving traps in council systems. Myra Yoon, still in the council chambers for this final report, laughed. Actually laughed. Sabotage? No, security. Every system has administrator access. That's basic engineering. You just never bothered to learn how they worked. You wanted the benefits without the knowledge. You wanted us to build and maintain everything while you kept control? Well, we built it. We maintained it. And when you told us to leave, we left. If you want control, learn how your own systems work. Counselor Vresh, who had laughed when humans departed, wasn't laughing anymore. Name your price. What will it take for you to return? Myra looked around the chamber. At the beings who had voted to subjugate humanity. At the species who had taken human labor for granted. At the civilization that had grown comfortable exploiting others. There is no price, she said. We're not negotiating. You made your decision? You wanted us gone unless we accepted being subordinate. Well, we're gone. And we're not subordinate to anyone anymore. Live with your choice. She walked out of the council chambers for the last time. Behind her, the emergency session continued, but there was nothing left to discuss. The damage was done. On the screens, the numbers kept getting worse. Trade down to 49%. Medical crisis spreading to 6 worlds now. Defense failures reported in 21 sectors. Infrastructure collapse accelerating. The council had thought humanity needed them. They had thought 300 years of integration meant humans were dependent on council systems. Council trade, council protection. They had thought wrong. It was the council who needed humans. They had just been too proud to realize it. And now, 6 months after the judgment, they finally understood the price of that pride. The galaxy was burning, and they had thrown away the only people who knew how to put out the fires. 1 year after the Exodus, the Galactic Council faced something they never imagined possible. They were becoming irrelevant. Not destroyed, not conquered. Just slowly fading into insignificance while a new power structure emerged around them. It started small. 3 minor species left the Council in the first month. They were tiny civilizations, barely noticed. The Council didn't care. But then 5 more left. Then 12. Then 47. Within a year, 300 species had formally withdrawn from the Council and joined something new. The Independent Systems Alliance. Ambassador Doyeon Kim stood in the new Alliance headquarters, watching the latest batch of applications. The building was on Harmony Station, a massive structure humanity had built in neutral space. It was clean and modern, with none of the ancient grandeur of Council stations. But it was theirs. Another 15 applications today, his aide reported. Mostly smaller species. A few mid-tier civilizations. They all say the same thing. They want to be treated as equals. Doyeon smiled. Equals, that was the word that changed everything. The Council had never offered that. They had offered membership in a hierarchy. Ancient species at the top, powerful species in the middle, and everyone else at the bottom. The young and weak were expected to serve the old and strong. Humanity offered something different. Partnership. Every species in the Independent Systems Alliance had equal votes. Equal rights, equal opportunities. It didn't matter if your civilization was 1,000,000 years old or 100. It didn't matter if you controlled 1,000 worlds or just one. Every member was treated the same. The Council called it naive. They said it would never work. They said young species needed guidance from their elders. They said some civilizations were simply better suited to leadership than others, but species kept leaving to join humanity anyway. Senator Kyung-min Oh represented humanity in these final Council interactions. She was young for a senator, only 35, with fierce determination in her eyes. She had grown up during the Exodus, and she had no patience for Council excuses. "You're stealing our members," Thamara accused during one session. Kyung-min corrected her immediately. "They're leaving. Of their own choice. Just like we did. No one is forcing them. We're not raiding your territory or conscripting your citizens. They're choosing to join us because they prefer what we offer. If that bothers you, perhaps consider why they're leaving." The Council tried sanctions. They declared that any species joining the Independent Systems Alliance would lose Council trade privileges. It backfired. The species that joined humanity didn't need Council trade anymore. Human merchant vessels connected the entire alliance, moving goods more efficiently than Council trade networks ever had. The sanctions hurt the Council more than the alliance. The Council tried military threats. They declared the Independent Systems Alliance an illegal organization and sent fleet patrols to monitor Alliance territory. The patrols retreated after 3 encounters with human defense forces. Not because battles were fought, but because the Council commanders realized they were outmatched. Human ships were smaller but faster, better armed, better maintained, and crewed by people who actually knew how to fight. The Council tried diplomatic isolation. They declared that Alliance members would not be recognized in Council space and would receive no Council assistance. Species joined the Alliance anyway. They didn't want Council assistance. They wanted human partnership. Prime Mediator Yoonji Shin's office received thousands of private messages from Council members. She reviewed them each morning with her coffee, and they all said essentially the same thing. "Help us. Convince your government to return. We'll give you anything you want." Her response never changed. "We spent 300 years trying to work within your system. You answered with contempt and restrictions. We're building something better now. You're welcome to join us as equals. That's the only offer." That word again, equals, it was the one thing the Council couldn't give. Historian Minseo Park published a comprehensive study that went viral across every network. Human and Alien. The Council of Equals that never was examined 3,000 years of Council history with brutal honesty. She showed how the same 12 species had dominated every major decision for millennia, how younger species were systematically excluded from real power, how innovation was stifled whenever it threatened established interests, how the entire system was designed to keep the powerful powerful and the weak weak. The publication triggered protests on 47 council worlds. Species that had accepted their place in the hierarchy for centuries suddenly questioned why they accepted it. Riots broke out. Governments fell. The council's stability, built on millennia of tradition, cracked. Meanwhile, humanity thrived. The Independent Systems Alliance grew stronger every day, and humans kept innovating in ways the council never could. Chief Scientist Junho Lim made the announcement from Earth Science Ministry. We've completed development of Fusion Mark 7 technology. It reduces energy costs by 90% compared to previous fusion methods, and 98% compared to traditional fission. We're offering the complete technical specifications to all Independent Systems Alliance members, free of charge. The council representatives demanded access. They sent formal requests, then informal pleas, then angry demands. Junho's response was simple. 8 years ago, I presented an early prototype of this technology to the Council Science Board. They rejected it, called it dangerously unstable and typically human over complexity. Those are direct quotes from their report. Now the technology is proven and safe. But I remember what they said. I remember how they dismissed our work without even testing it properly. Why would I share it with people who have no respect for human innovation? The council couldn't argue. The rejection was in their own records. On the military front, Admiral Ji-hoon Song demonstrated exactly why human defense forces were superior. The Korathi swarm, those insect-like raiders who had terrorized the Outer Rim for decades, made the mistake of attacking an Independent Systems Alliance colony? They expected an easy target. The council had never defended these regions properly. The battle lasted 4 hours. Human ships, working with Alliance vessels, destroyed the entire swarm raiding fleet. Not one enemy ship escaped. The human casualties were minimal. The tactical efficiency was stunning. And the entire battle was broadcast across the galaxy. The Council's military advisors studied the engagement in horror. The tactics humans used weren't just good. They were decades ahead of Council doctrine. Coordinated strike patterns, adaptive defense grids, predictive targeting systems. Every move showed experience that Council forces didn't have. Refugees started flowing toward human space. Not from war zones, from Council territories. Species that had lived under Council rule for centuries were leaving their homes to join the Alliance. They weren't fleeing danger. They were fleeing stagnation. The Council finally sent a formal delegation to negotiate humanity's return. It was the largest diplomatic mission they had ever assembled. Supreme Arbiter Thalmora herself led it. Along with representatives from the 50 most powerful Council species, they met at Harmony Station, in a conference room humanity had built specifically for such occasions. The room was simple but elegant, with real windows showing the stars outside. Council stations never had windows. They relied on screens and projections. But humans liked seeing the universe they lived in. Ambassador Doyeon Kim greeted them politely but without warmth. This was the same group that had judged humanity a year ago. The same group that had voted to reduce them to tributary status. Now they were here to beg. "Name your terms," Thalmara said. She tried to sound commanding, but there was desperation underneath. "What will it take for humanity to return to the Council?" Doyeon leaned back in his chair. "We don't want to return. That's not acceptable. It's not negotiable." The meeting lasted 4 hours. The Council offered everything they could think of. Full voting rights, territory expansion, trade preferences, military independence, seats on every major council. Essentially, all the things humanity had asked for over 300 years and been denied. Doyeon listened patiently. Then he spoke. "Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to go back to the Council and report that we rejected your offer. Your member species are going to continue leaving to join us. Your economy is going to keep declining. Your military is going to remain inadequate. Your infrastructure is going to keep failing. And eventually, you'll have a choice. You can either dissolve and reform as something better, or you can fade into irrelevance as the galaxy moves on without you. You need us, Thalmora insisted. You need our resources, our knowledge, No, Doyon interrupted. You need us. You've needed us for 300 years. You just convinced yourselves that you were doing us a favor by letting us serve you. That's over now. We're building our own future. And we're doing it without you. He stood up. This meeting is over. You can show yourselves out? The council delegation left Harmony Station in humiliated silence. They had come offering everything. They left with nothing. Because humanity didn't want what they were offering. Humanity wanted something the council couldn't give. Independence, dignity, the right to determine their own future. That night, 3 more species applied to join the Independent Systems Alliance. Then 5 more the next day. Then 8. The exodus from the council was accelerating. 5 years after the exodus, the Galactic Council did something unprecedented in its 3,000-year history. They held a referendum on whether to dissolve themselves and start over. The vote was close. Out of 547 remaining member species, 274 voted yes. 273 voted no. By a single vote, the Galactic Council ended. In its place, they formed the Galactic Alliance. New name, new structure, new rules. Every species had equal votes. The hierarchy was abolished. The ancient privileges were removed. Economically exploitative practices were banned. Military responsibilities were shared. Species could join or leave freely. It looked remarkably similar to what humanity had been proposing for 300 years. President Seojin Park, elected leader of the Terran Federation and its 73 allied species, addressed the former council from his office on Earth. The transmission was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the human president spoke to the civilization that had rejected his people. You taught us a valuable lesson, Seojin said. His voice was calm but firm. Power respects power. Fairness must be enforced. And peace is a choice that must be made every day by everyone, or it doesn't last. For 3 centuries, you chose hierarchy over equality. You chose exploitation over partnership. You chose comfort over justice. Not because you were evil, but because it was easier. Because the system benefited you. Because changing would have required admitting you were wrong. He paused, looking directly into the camera. You've changed now. You've reformed your laws, restructured your government, and promised to do better. That's good. But you didn't change because you wanted to. You changed because you had to. Because we forced you to by leaving. That's not growth. That's survival instinct. And we need to understand the difference. The new Supreme Speaker of the Galactic Alliance, a moderate named Counselor Krax who had warned against the original judgment, responded with humility. We made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. We see that now. Join us. Show the galaxy that you believe in second chances. Ambassador Yuna Choi attended the Alliance's inaugural session as an observer. Not as a member, just watching. She was Doyon Kim's successor, younger but just as determined. She sat in the gallery while the new alliance conducted its first official business, and she took careful notes. After the session, Supreme Speaker Krax approached her personally. We've changed. Truly changed. The old ways are gone. We're equals now, all of us. Isn't that what humanity always wanted? Yuna considered her answer carefully. This was an important moment, and the entire galaxy was watching. We believe in second chances, she said. But we also believe in consequences. You had 300 years to do the right thing. You chose not to. Now you've changed, but only because we forced you to. That's not redemption. That's adaptation. She looked around the reformed chambers. In 100 years, when a generation has grown up under your new system, when you've proven this isn't just temporary reform but permanent change, ask us again. If you can show us that equality isn't just a policy you adopted out of desperation, but a value you actually believe in, maybe then we can talk about closer ties. But not today. Today, you need to prove you mean it. The Alliance accepted her answer. They had no choice. They were in no position to make demands. 20 years after the Exodus, something remarkable happened. A species called the Varani achieved faster-than-light travel and made first contact with galactic civilization. They were young and curious, with enormous potential. They faced a choice that every emerging species faced. Which galactic power to approach first? They chose humanity. When asked why, their ambassador said something simple. We studied both groups. The Alliance has ancient knowledge and vast resources. But the Federation has something more important. They treat newcomers like partners, not subordinates. We want to join a civilization that sees us as equals, not as primitives to be guided. Over the next decade, 2/3 of emerging species made the same choice. The Terran Federation grew while the Galactic Alliance stagnated. Not because the Alliance was evil or oppressive anymore, but because humanity had built a reputation. They kept their promises. They shared their knowledge. They treated others with respect. And species remembered that the Alliance still existed and even thrived in its own way. The reforms were genuine. The equality was real. Species that remained in the Alliance were generally happy with the changes. But the Alliance was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. That position belonged to a species that had been dismissed, exploited, and finally discarded. Historian Minseo Park, now elderly but still writing, published her final work. The Price of Arrogance: How the Galactic Council Lost the Galaxy. It became required reading in both Alliance and Federation schools. Her conclusion was taught to every student of galactic history. The Council thought humanity needed them. They were wrong. They needed humanity. Not for labor or innovation or military protection, though those were valuable. They needed humanity to show them what they had become. A stagnant hierarchy that valued tradition over justice, power over fairness, comfort over growth. Humanity was the mirror they refused to look into. When we left, they finally had to face themselves. And they didn't like what they saw. Admiral Ji-Hoon Song, retired and teaching at the Naval Academy, gave a speech that became legendary among military officers. He was 70 years old, his hair white but his eyes still sharp. Young cadets filled the auditorium to hear the man who had led humanity through the Exodus. They called us dangerous when we refused to surrender our weapons, Song said. They called us aggressive when we defended our allies. They called us arrogant when we insisted on equality. And in a way, they were right. We were dangerous. Not to innocent beings, but to their comfortable system. We were dangerous to their hierarchy. We were dangerous to their exploitation. We were dangerous to their assumption that ancient equals right. He walked across the stage, looking at the young faces before him. Never forget what they taught us. Respect must be mutual, or it's not respect at all. Partnership must be equal, or it's not partnership. And when someone shows you, they'll never treat you as an equal. Believe them the first time. Don't waste 300 years hoping they'll change. Walk away and build something better. On Earth, in the Museum of Galactic History, visitors could experience the entire story. The centuries of negotiation, the countless compromises, the patience and persistence, and finally, the moment humanity said enough. The most popular exhibit was a simple holographic recording. Ambassador Doyeon Kim turning his back on the council and walking away. 5 words echoing in the chamber, "Then we are done here." School children watched that moment and asked their teachers why the aliens had been so mean. Teachers explained that it wasn't about meanness. It was about systems and structures and how easy it is for good people to participate in unjust systems without realizing it. The council members weren't monsters. They were just comfortable with a hierarchy that benefited them. And they didn't see anything wrong with it until someone showed them the cost. Philosophers across the galaxy debated whether humanity's defiance was prideful or principled. Some argued that humanity should have stayed and reformed the council from within. Others argued that some systems are too broken to reform and must be abandoned, but everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy was better for what humanity had done. The old council had been stagnant for millennia. The Exodus shattered that stagnation. It forced change. It created competition. It proved that hierarchies could be challenged and alternatives could succeed. 50 years after the Exodus, Ambassador Una Choi, now elderly herself, met with Supreme Speaker Crax one final time. They sat in a quiet garden on Harmony Station, drinking tea and discussing the old days. Crax was ancient now, one of the few original council members still alive. "We really did change," Crax said quietly. "The alliance isn't perfect, but it's better than what we had. Younger species have real power now. Innovation is encouraged. Exploitation is illegal. We've grown." "I know," Una said. "I've been watching. It's genuine progress. Then will humanity ever rejoin us?" Una smiled. "Rejoin? No, we're not going backward. But perhaps our children's children might see value in closer cooperation. The Federation and the Alliance working together as true partners, not one subordinate to the other, not competing for dominance. Just two different approaches to galactic civilization, each learning from the other. That would be good," Crax said. "Yes," Una agreed. "That would be good." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the garden's transparent dome. Two old diplomats who had watched their civilizations transform. The galaxy was different now. More dynamic. More competitive. More free. And while humanity would never forget the 300 years of being dismissed, they could acknowledge that sometimes people do change. Sometimes systems can be reformed. Sometimes the price of arrogance can be paid and something better can emerge, but the lesson remained. Humanity had left in defiance because staying would have meant accepting chains. They had walked away from power and comfort and safety because some things matter more than security. Dignity matters. Freedom matters. The right to determine your own future matters. The Council had learned that too late. But they had learned, and across the galaxy, billions of beings studied that moment in history and drew their own lessons. Some learned that hierarchies are dangerous. Some learned that patience has limits. Some learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. But everyone learned this. When a species shows you who they are through their actions, believe them. And when someone demands you accept being less than equal, say no and walk away. Because dignity isn't something you beg for. It's something you claim. Humanity left in defiance. The Council learned regret. And the galaxy changed forever.